This is why I can dig people like my best friend James, the Owl Smasher, and say there has to be a different category. There has to be a third option. They're saying that
Why?
these people, because it just doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem like
All right, so you should have another Torah
rational.
too then.
It doesn't sound rational.
It's absolutely rational. God gave you a bunch of commandments in the Torah to keep, and now suddenly 3,500 years later, because Jews want to make conversion impossible, now there has to be another option. Instead of saying that Jews should keep the halakha and convert people in one day, anyone who wants to convert. So that's rational. It's completely irrational to think that if God only gave one standard, that we as people are going to invent another standard, and on top of that, say that whoever keeps a standard will also get to heaven. If heaven is this metaphysical place that God controls, shouldn't he decide who gets in or who doesn't? I'm just saying, from a Torah perspective, the most rational thing is that if God has commandments, and in these commandments he says that if you do this, if you eat pork, it's a toeva, an abomination to me. People violating the Sabbath offends God because you're saying that he didn't create the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. No, this God, because of opinions 1,000 years ago, is forced to say that someone could be considered righteous in his eyes by not keeping his commandments or by only keeping 7 commandments. I mean, that's what's irrational.
Yeah.
See, the problem is never in Jewish history has conversion been politicized like today. Now converting to Judaism is no longer just entering the Jewish people in a religious state. It's being eligible to make aliyah, the possibility of becoming an economic burden to a state. And that's what Israel's scared of. They're scared that if they will accept conversions from South America, because the state of Israel outlawed conversions from South America, every Nicaraguan, every Costa Rican, every Peruvian would run to the state of Israel because Israel's economy is better. So conversion has nothing to do with belief in God anymore. It's if we want you in our borders. This is why Israel, I remember when I was there, where they offered a double sal klita, a double absorption basket for Russians who made aliyah, even over Americans. Why? Because a Russian ole is irreligious, serves in the military, is very well cultured. He or she is the ideal secular citizen. And being that Israel is 90% secular, that's who they want. While if you're an Orthodox Jew who's kind of ambiguous if you support the state from a religious perspective and who's going to complain about buses running on Shabbat and forcing the government to have a Hesder program so religious kids could join the army, Israel's not going to be so happy to open its doors to you. So it's all become politicized. So I understand it's rational nowadays because they've screwed it up so much that you have people for the first time sitting on the fence. Never in 3,000 years did you have a segment, a class in the Jewish world of people who were not Gentiles and not technically Jewish. People who knew that Torah was true, who will do anything to become part of the Jewish people, but it's the Jewish people saying, no, we don't want you. It's never happened till now. And it's so stupid because never in Jewish history did you ever have so many people wanting to join Israel, love Israel as much, not even in the times of King Solomon.
Yeah.
So stupid. I mean, Jews are dying to leave Judaism because Jews hate Judaism and Israelis hate Israel, and Gentiles are dying to get in, and they're going to build a wall. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. Yes, the Noahide movement is completely irrational, but they're not irrational alone. The reason they're irrational is because of orthodoxy. Orthodoxy has twisted the law and given birth to this irrational movement. But it's not the Noahide's fault. Every Noahide should stop calling himself a Noahide and stop calling himself a Ger Toshav and just say, I'm in the process of conversion. That whether that conversion takes you 10 years, 20 years, you're in transition. Don't call yourself a Gentile. You accept the Torah like the mixed multitude in Israel accepted Torah. It's not your fault that the Jews don't want to convert you, but the Jews don't hold a monopoly to Torah, but they don't control God. So this idea like, well, unless I convert you, God won't recognize you as part of his people. That's stupid.
No, I dig it, but you were kind of harsh with me and say, well, they're Gentile, and you were like, abrupt with me, and then you got a problem with what Rabbi Katz is trying to do. It's like almost like, aren't they trying to find an answer somehow?
I've never heard Rabbi Katz challenge the status quo regarding converts, conversion. He made the problem bigger than it originally was, because before people like him and Chaim Chlorophene with the Divine Code and all these books, people were just trying to convert. In other words, there wasn't a crutch developed for them. Since then, you have people now for the first time saying, I don't want to be Jewish. I'm a Noahide. I'm a Ger Toshav. And you know what? I even heard people say, coming out of his group, that we're more special than the Jews because we predated Torah and Abraham. They created a monster. Instead of saying, you know what? I'm not going to create a web page. I'm not going to create a YouTube channel to further push this Noahide movement. I'm going to create a web page and the YouTube channel to challenge the status quo, to challenge these rabbis, to call these people out. But nobody does it. Nobody does it. Why? Because there's no money in it. One, there's no money in it. And two, you're going to be thrown under the bus by Jews for doing it. I mean, look what people say about me. What the heck have I ever done to anyone? All right, but stand up for converts. Oh, I'm fake. I'm a Christian.
Right. I for the record, I do believe that there's only one Torah, and the Torah is God's word, of course, and that we shouldn't change halakha and
I'm not trying to be hard on you. I mean, I'm not trying to be hard on you.
No, the halakha is the halakha, and we can't go against it. You're right. But people like Courtney. I mean, she's a good person, and there's people like me. I mean, it's just I don't feel like being called a Gentile is an accurate label. And you did kind of answer this. You did say I should just call myself in transition. I'm a gear in transition.
Man, I never called you a Gentile. I'm not someone who calls people Gentiles. Just that whole notion of being a goy is a much, much later idea, right? Goy, okay, right? It means nation, right? Earlier today, I was discussing with Courtney how it doesn't really matter what nation you belong to. It's who you identify with philosophically. And she brought up how in Torah, it mentions Moab and Ammon as people who we give a hard time when they try to enter the congregation of Israel. So the Rambam says, yeah, they could convert, but they're only allowed to marry another convert or mamzerim. But then later on, this appears in Serbia, he brings on the actual halacha. And this is what I mentioned last week, that since Sancherib, who was a general and also the king of Assyria, he had a tactic that every time he would conquer a nation, he would disperse the inhabitants of that land all throughout his empire to in some way stop mutiny from occurring.
Oh, wow.
Well, the halacha is, as brought down by the Rambam here in Serbia, that since that happened, that no one could claim to be part of any old biblical group or nation. He even says that even if you know for a fact whether this person's from Moab or this person's from Ammon or this person's Amalek, it still doesn't matter because he says their national identities got mixed. In other words, he's leading us to the idea that it's what you believe because no one nowadays actually knew the type of idolatry these nations practice, how they viewed God. Yeah. In other words, it's about what you believe. It doesn't matter where you came from. So I think what the Rambam is saying is that when the Torah made the statement about not just an Ammonite or a Moabite or an Egyptian or an Edomite, but anyone who detaches himself from their nation is allowed to enter Israel fully and marry whoever they want fully.